There is a huge endorsement that comes from the global community, but Ambassador Al-Hussein, there are some who are also objecting. What do you say to those who are still reticent to really extend support to the African Union? And what are the conversations that you've had, if any, during the meetings where this proposal was put?
Yeah, to start with, actually, African countries recognize and realize the benefits that they can gain from joining the G20. But inside Africa and outside Africa, there is some voices arguing that the African continent challenges are very diversified, and they don't see that joining the G20 will be helpful in overcoming those challenges and problems. But in my opinion, joining G20 will be much and more beneficial for the African continent, African countries. African countries are facing a lot of challenges in terms of climate change, terrorism, financing its development projects. And by joining G20, African country will be in a better position to attract this kind of support, whether it is financial or technical, especially when we talk about G20, including countries has a very good relation and special relations, I can say, with African continent, that is India. And African countries are counting a lot on India to support them in the near future and to overcome their problems in terms of technical support and other kind of cooperation.
Right. Mr. Ganju, have you heard in your conversations of objections to this proposal? We know that there's public endorsement, a lot of them who have come out publicly and endorsed, some who have not publicly endorsed, but is there any country that has actually come out and said, maybe this is not the time?
This is a very tricky question to answer. But in all the multilateral meetings, I have not seen anybody objecting to African Union not being included in the G20. But there are some murmurs, like Excellency has told you, what will be the gain of the Africa by joining the G20. But the African Union, in the chair being the President of the Comoros, is of the view that we must join, and there is a support, majority support in African Union to join the G20. Now the question is whether it will happen. Like you said, so many years have passed, every time it was discussed, but this time I see different scenario, because the initiative taken by India, and especially by Prime Minister Modi, is that he is fully supporting it. And there is a news that the US is also supporting it, and there are many other countries who are supporting it. I'm very sure, I told you I'm very sure, I had a lot of discussions with other ambassadors also. It is going to happen this time. If not this time, then when?
That's a very important point. The chair of the African Union, Comoros, represented by Mr. K.L. Ganju, says that it is going to happen this time. That's good news, Ambassador Issa. But again, when I talk about concerns, there are certain quarters who say the influence of China in Africa, should that be a concern for the world body? How will that then start influencing G20 decisions if there's an entire organization that has enough influence from China, coming in from China?
Well, first of all, we have to separate two things. The general talking and the real politics. We know that in this world, in the 21st century, it's impossible that any countries evaluate or evaluate in this world by itself only. This is the time for organization. This is the time for regional integration. This is the time for reunification of many organizations and many countries into organization to go forward, because the economy became global, because information became global, because everything became global. And because of this globalization, everybody has an interest to be part of our own organization. And it's impossible that Africa, with all this population, with all this potentiality, to be left aside. Otherwise, this progress will not be made by the rest of the world, because of migration, because of crisis, because of opportunities, on the other hand, that are present in Africa. Or if Africa is left by the G20, then G20 will be the biggest loser. So Africa needs to be included in every institution, because Africa is the continent of the future. That's why Prime Minister Modi also is advocating for a seat at the permanent seat at the Security Council of the United Nations. So Prime Minister Modi has understood before everybody that Africa will be the partner of the century.
Well, that's a very important point that Ambassador Issa makes, that if Africa is not included, it's G20 that stands to lose.